Hi, Scott Orlin with Cinema Magazine. In our continuing series of Cinema Outside the Box, film fans, I have such a delightful treat for you. Today we have the widow of the iconic Gene Kelly, not only his wife, but also the purveyor of his legacy and his archives. Patricia, thank you so much for being here. If we were not living in the age of COVID, you would have a job of going out and you kind of do a one-woman show showcasing Gene's work. For those people who may be fortunate in the future to get this experience, briefly, can you just talk about what do you showcase?
Well, I have a one-woman show called Gene Kelly, The Legacy, and I always describe it as kind of a journey into his heart and mind. And I kind of say it's like you get in a little boat with me and I take you, you don't know quite where you're headed, and I take you in behind the scenes and where you really begin to understand not only how he crafted these numbers, but why and what drove him and what his passions were. And by the end of it, I think you come out, you really have a better understanding of the many dimensions of this man. I think so many people see him up on the screen and they love him. I mean, he's incredible up there, but they don't recognize that he spoke French, he spoke Italian, he spoke Yiddish, he read Latin, he very often read a book a day. Many people forget that he's directing these pictures, that he's choreographing them, that he is working closely with the musicians and the arrangers. And so I think I love it because I always greet people. I don't know how we're going to do this post-COVID, but I greet people before and after the shows. And because I always say it's a reciprocal experience because I learn so much from the audience members. I listen to them, I feel their responses. And afterward, people come up and they'll say to me, I loved him before, but I love him even more now, because they understand this immense mind and really what went into crafting these pictures. And I created a second big show. It's a big live symphony show with 70 musicians on stage, and the clips, we play the music live to the clips, and we preserve Gene's beautiful voice and his taps, and then I weave the stories in between. And that really gives people an intimate sense of the relationship between the music and the dance. A lot of times I think they just kind of take it for granted that these numbers are up there on the screen. They don't think, how did it get up there? And this shows them how Singing in the Rain came into being and how Jerry the Mouse came about. And so it's really fun to share these things. And as I say, it's a kind of, Gene always felt, particularly when he was on the Broadway stage, he loved being with a live audience because he felt that reciprocal relationship, that you listen to the audience and you move with them. And I really feel that. You can hear the comments and you hear the tears, you hear the laughter. And so I miss it. I mean, I miss being out there with everybody, but since I can't tour, I decided to get back to work on the book that he actually brought me to California to write back in 1986. And so I have a lovely project during this lockdown time, concentrated work about him. But
let me ask you, because there are going to be a generation of people who are watching this who sadly may not have ever seen a Gene Kelly movie or are unaware of his iconic contributions to the entertainment industry. If you were to guide them right now, what would be a couple of projects they should see that are full representations of the genius of Gene Kelly?
Well, I think I always suggest to people that, I mean, you can very easily go to YouTube now and see some of the iconic clips. And I think that's a good way to get into him, because I'll say to young people or older people who don't have any access to him, I'll say, go on YouTube and obviously look at the iconic Singing in the Rain number. I mean, that's one that a lot of times people may not, when you say Gene Kelly, that may not ring a bell, but you say, do you remember the guy who danced in the rain with the umbrella? And they go, oh, yeah, I know that. And then they start to sing it, which is quite funny. So they're aware of it. But I think that's a good one. But then I think really to kind of begin to see the breadth of his choreography and his dancing, I always think Go watch him dance with Jerry the Mouse. I mean, that's extraordinary and so far ahead of its time with 1945 blending live action and animation. I also think that the roller skating number in It's Always Fair Weather is a good way to get into Gene, because people are just blown away. You see him tap dancing on roller skates and singing, and it's such a beautiful number to me. And the Andre Previn music is great. And I think that I also think that the newspaper dance in Summer Stock is a great way to get into him. You're getting to see this. You see how contemporary he was, how ahead of his time. He looks so cool, and yet it's 1950, but he's wearing clothes that basically he could. A lot of kids will say to me, gosh, he looks like he just walked out of a J. Crew catalog. I mean, those were his clothes. And you see him tearing this newspaper in this incredibly athletic performance. And I think people begin to think, oh, well, this is dance, and this is really athletic. This is really cool. And so I think those are good ways in. I think for the classically trained ballet people to go to the pas de deux in Brigadoon when you see Gene dancing with Sid Charisse, he thought that was the best he ever did on film. And then also I would say watch Gene in contrast with Sid in Singing in the Rain, in the extraordinary Broadway melody ballet, when she's looks like he shaped her to look like his childhood. He had a childhood crush on Louise Brooks, and so he made her with the haircut and the dress and everything to look like her. But that's hot jazz, and I think that again people think, oh. Because I think if people haven't been exposed to musicals and dance on film, they're kind of turned off by it. They think it's sort of old-fashioned. They think it's going to be kind of hokey. And in fact, they see this stuff and it's radical. It's revolutionary. It's ahead of its time. And it's contemporary and timeless. And it's just riveting. I mean, so I think some of those pieces, but I could go on. I mean, you could look at The Pirate, you could just, and that's what my show is a compilation of these. People always say, what's your favorite film? And I say, well, I don't really have a favorite film. I have so many favorite clips that show this breadth of his work. And so that's what the show incorporates. And I think that's a good way to get at Gene, because then you really see this across the board. And then you have to remember he's behind the camera. He's behind the camera as the eye for how the camera moves and how it captures the dance. And that's as important as what he's doing up on the screen.
You know, somebody who has had such an illustrious career, there would be a treasure trove of archives. Sadly, there was a fire. I know that he did lose some of his memorabilia, but there is still a lot of stuff that is there that, thank God, you're the purveyor of and you're kind of overseeing. Can you just share with us one or two super cool things that was like, oh my God, how that is part of cinematic history?
Well, the thing that is true that, and it is kind of mythology that you'll read that he lost everything, and he lost a lot, as you say. But fortunately, a lot of items, including a lot of paper materials, were in a back room. And what I love are the letters that survived, and that each shows the writer's personality. And one I have, just for example, is from Irving Berlin to Gene, and about Hello, Dolly. And you kind of think about it, you think, what's extraordinary to me is that these exceptional artists wrote to each other to compliment each other, to congratulate each other, to cheer each other on. You don't have that kind of thing now, and you certainly don't have it documented in a hard letter. And I'm sorry about that, because I think something's really been lost. And I mean, this, for example, Irving Berlin says to Gene, he says, there are so many great moments in the picture. That one chorus of Hello, Dolly with Streisand and Armstrong is as high a spot as I've ever seen in any picture. And that parade is really amazing. And he signs it, as always, Irving. I mean, that, to me, that just, some of these things just take your breath away. I mean, they're really, and then they're fun things like, I mean, Gene was not only ahead of his time with filmmaking, but he was ahead of his time sartorially. As I said, what you see, unless he's doing a costume picture, that's what he wore around the house. So if you want to know what I saw around the house, it was Gene. And so one thing I love about the photos of Gene directing Hello, Dolly is that you see him up on the boom and he's got his usual art cap, but he's also wearing Converse tennis shoes. And so these are in the archive. And I just think it's, again, how cool is that? You know, I mean, he's 50 years ago and he's wearing something that everybody today is putting on, and he wore him out. He wore him around the house when I was with him always. So, you
know, Gene, like I said before, bless his heart, was part of Hollywood royalty. When you came into his life, I mean, I don't want to say necessarily you were an outsider, but as any of us, like when you first come into a family, it's like, who are all these people? But all his people were incredibly famous. I mean, so for you, how interesting was it to then come into this environment and everywhere you looked was somebody who may have affected your own childhood?
Well, but the interesting thing about my arrival was, you hit it right on the head. I mean, I was a complete outsider, such an outsider that when I first met Gene, I did not even know who Gene Kelly was, because I was a nerdy American literature scholar. I was actually a Herman Melville specialist. And so I didn't grow up like a lot of people did. I didn't grow up with Hollywood as my world and with posters of these people on my walls. And I hear from all these people who say that they would stay home. Their mother would keep them home from school to watch these movies on television. That was not my household. My dad was a professor, and my mother worked very hard. And so me coming out, Roddy McDowall, the actor, said, "Oh, my dear," he said, "you were like Alice falling down the rabbit hole." And I really feel that, because I wasn't in awe of these people. I wasn't, they weren't on my radar. So I had to get up to speed very, very fast. And I always say it was like a class of 101, Cinema 101 with Gene. At night, we would run movies, and he would introduce me to people like John Ford and tell me how these scenes were shot and how the camera's used. And so it was, and Frank Sinatra, I mean, this was just a world I didn't know. And so we would sit on the couch at night and listen to Frank Sinatra, and Gene would describe why his voice was so exceptional, and his breathing, and why his arrangements, when they were good, were the best, and when they were bad, they were bad. And it was this phenomenal opening of a world that I had no exposure to. But Gene was such a good teacher, and so good. He was so knowledgeable about so many things that he opened it all up in a really inviting way, I'd say. You know, it wasn't like you felt like, oh, another class. It was just phenomenal. I mean, I would give anything to have him back, because now, 30 years later, I understand so much more. I feel like I could learn so much more now, but you know, that's not going to happen. So,
and just a last question for you. Obviously, Hollywood likes to kind of tip its hat back to itself. And we've seen so many movies that have been, you mentioned Streisand, about Fanny Brice, you know, now we have Jennifer Hudson about to do Aretha Franklin. Is there we haven't really seen any Gene Kelly biopics or stuff?
No, we haven't, because he's explicitly asked not to have one. That was the one thing that he said he did not want. So I've been really adamant about that. We watched several together, and he articulated that he said, I do not want this. So I will adhere to that. So you won't see it. And in a funny way, who's going to play that? I mean, I think that's the problem, is that I always say that you kind of made one of these guys, you know, I always say they're like comets that just soar through the air once. You know, you get one Judy Garland, you get one Frank Sinatra, you get one Gene Kelly. And I think that, you know, look, that's why I use Gene's own works to illustrate Gene, because I don't think there's anybody better. I mean, he couldn't even use a stuntman most of the time. It's very rare. It's only in the most dangerous situation, that like riding a horse in a long distance shot, that he would use a stuntman, because he knew his movement and his body were so unique. And so I'll keep him that way, and I will protect what he said he wanted.
Well, thank you for sharing even this part, Patricia. What an incredible treat. For those of you, please take a look and see the genius of Gene Kelly, and hopefully maybe one day you get to see Patricia's show. And this is Scott Orlin. Until next time.
That's great. Thank you.